Merry meet. I'm Aislin. This is Ask Aislin, and I'm here today with a special shadow work and energy work Q&A. So if you are here live, you can drop questions and comments in the chat. Otherwise, I have a bunch of questions that people have sent me. I'm just going to dive right in and start answering them. I just wanted to begin with the first question that people often have is, what is shadow work? So, shadow work is a process where we can acknowledge the rejected parts of ourselves. And you might be surprised to find, or you might not be surprised to find this, but we all do have a shadow, which is composed of these rejected pieces that are either rejected parts, roles, hats that we tried on when we were a child, or personality traits that are shunned in our society, like anger and greed, avarice, things that the society, our common society, does not acknowledge as good traits. So, what happens is that we end up putting on a mask. We develop this mask called the persona, and we start this very early. And this is our likable personality that we will portray out into the world, display it out for all to see. But the trouble is that it's not really who we are, and deep down underneath the unconscious, we have all of this stuff going on that we're not acknowledging. So it takes a lot of energy to keep all of the pieces of the shadow self underground. And shadow work is a process where we begin to discover some of these pieces of ourselves that have been rejected, have been subverted, put down underneath the unconscious. We acknowledge them, we integrate them, and over many cycles of this process, a profound amount of healing can take place. So, I wanted to tell a bit about my own story, my own journey with shadow work. And I had a very unexpected finding when I was doing it. So, I've been dabbling in shadow work for years, back 25 years ago. I don't think it seems it to be as quite as popular as it is today. And so there wasn't a lot out there. I would kind of dabble in it here and there. I found it very interesting, even in my own coven with some of the more advanced students, some of the women who had, elevated into some of the higher degrees. We would do some shadow work. But I didn't really dive into it deeply until about 3 years ago when I had an ectopic pregnancy. And though I was able to heal my body fairly quickly, it took a lot of time to heal my emotional body. And so I really dove deep into this shadow work process in order to face my own dark night of the soul. Now, what's really interesting is that I found, obviously, that it helped me, or I wouldn't be doing this. It helped me tremendously emotionally. I don't believe that I would survive the way that I did if it weren't for these practices. But the unexpected finding for me was, as a witch, the way it upleveled my magical practice and my spiritual abilities was mind blowing. I did not expect any of this to happen. So, um, for me, this was probably all of it's very good, but this was really, really good, right? As someone who is a spiritual practitioner, if we can up level in any way, we really, we really take our practices to the next level. So, not only that, I found my intuition strengthened. I found that I was more connected to the divine, and then all of the other good things that go along with shadow work came along with it. I was able to heal myself emotionally. I was able to not be quite as triggered by all of my triggers. I was able to recognize the motivations underneath the things I was doing or saying, improves relationships. So I'm actually going to dive into a little bit about the benefits. I started that already, but sometimes people will ask me, what are the benefits of shadow work? So all those things I said before, we become less affected by the negative energy and the negativity of other people, their own emotions. So a lot of us take in other people's emotions, and the thing is that when we are able to optimize our energy in our own bodies, in our energetic body, in our emotional body, in our mental body, we are better able to have protection against the negativity of other people. In a lot of ways, too, we're just simply not as affected by them. So it's not that the thing we see this negative energy coming towards us or this negativity of this other person, but it just isn't going to affect us in the same way as it used to. We also are able to clear our limiting beliefs. We all have limiting beliefs, whether we want to believe that or not. There are these underlying limiting beliefs that really do limit our potential, whether that's in our mundane lives or our magical lives. Through working with the shadow self, we're able to break through some of these and remove them. We also can heal our present and our past life trauma. So as we start to dig down underneath the surface of everything, we start to see what was below there, what was motivating what is going on in the present. And as we start to break through these blockages, we free ourselves up from that trauma. And it's not that the trauma goes away, it's not that we forget about it completely, but what we do recognize is that it doesn't bother us as much. We're not as affected by it as much. It really is an alchemical process. We can connect deeper to ourselves and the divine. Like I said, it is a process of self-discovery, and then through that, you really connect more deeply into the universe around you, into the divine. It improves our relationships because we're less triggered by other people. We are not the half of the relationship that is feeding fuel to the fire. And what you also may notice when you do a lot of shadow work is that because you are reacting differently to other people, they may never go and engage in their own shadow work process, but they can't react the same way to you because you're no longer reacting the same way to them. So it just, whether they up level or not, you up level the relationship just by doing your own work. And we also understand our underlying motivations for many things, like I said, and this is very, very freeing. We then can recognize whether or not we want to be triggered by this thing because now we know why we are. Before, it was just this unconscious thing. It just, the triggers would come up and we have no choice but to be triggered by them. And like I mentioned, we can strengthen our intuition, our magical abilities. Once we break through these blockages, we have more energy in the body for our higher energy centers, like developing our third eye, our throat, which is really the source of our creative power, and our crown chakra, which connects us to the universe and everything outside of us. So really, like I said, it really is like an alchemical process, and it is truly a way to evolve emotionally and spiritually. Some people even say it's the truest form to enlightenment, or the truest path to enlightenment, or at least one of them. There are other paths to enlightenment, but I really think that shadow work is a great one. All right, so another question that I often get asked is, why do we do energy work as well? So the techniques and my own approach to shadow work is a unique approach. As far as I know, I actually don't know anybody out there who's doing exactly the same thing that I'm doing. So there are a lot of people who teach shadow work, and there are a lot of people who teach energy work, and there aren't, as far as I know, anybody who puts the two together and brings it to you from a witchcraft perspective. So I believe that the combo of these two is really the way that we accelerate our growth and the healing process that will take place. So what happens is that energy work breaks through all the blockages in the energetic body. So we have all these energetic bodies, we have all of these subtle bodies. You know, our physical body is not our only body. We have the energetic body, and we have the mental and the emotional bodies as well, and we have bodies that are even more subtle than that. So what happens is that just through the modern life that we live, the fact that we've incarnated into this plane at this particular time, which is, as you know, very chaotic, we create a bunch of, I just shouldn't say we create, but a bunch of energetic blockages in our system become created. And what this means is that our energy is not able to flow unhampered through the system like we would like it to. So when we work with our energy system, what we do is we break those blockages up. That means that the energy is flowing more properly through the body, and we're more easily able to get down into the shadow, the places where shadow work really takes place, which is down in the emotional body and the mental body. And because of that, the combination of these two things, it really amplifies the effect that the shadow work has. So I'm going to talk a little bit more at the end about that, and you probably, as I start going through people's questions that they've sent me, I will also be, elaborating on that as well. So I am going to start diving in with some questions. So this first question comes from Valerie, and she was asking about different types of protection. Actually, you know what? I have all the questions right here, so I'm going to read the question. So she said she was wondering the best way to start with everyday protection, for example, keeping negativity at bay. She's noted that she does quite well at healing other people, but she feels that she needs to learn to not take on their negativity as her own. So if they're angry or upset, for example, she feels it's like they pass it on to her. And she hasn't been able to master the ability of letting it go. She said it feels it's almost like I store it. So she is definitely, Valerie, you're definitely not alone. Definitely not alone. So I just wanted to start by saying that there are different types of protection, and then I'm going to actually get into talking about more energetic protection. So there are physical, emotional, and spiritual ways that we can protect ourselves, and they can all be used in combination. So I noticed that the thread where this question was, there were people giving really good advice about spell work that can be done. So I'm just going to start by just saying a bit about that. So there are spells and practices for just general protection, herbs, stones, different things you can use. I highly recommend that everybody have a witch's bottle on their property. So witch's bottles are kind of gross to talk about, but they are highly effective. So what this is a bottle or a jar that you fill with a lot of undesirable things. So when my coven does these, we our maiden once, she brought like a broken glass. She broke a bunch of glass. So you put shards of glass in there, rusty nails, like I said, undesirable things. You can put spit, you can put urine. So a lot of people will put urine in the witches' bottles. They can put their cat hair. I have a bunch of, I have one iguana now. I used to have three. We put iguana skin in there. And if you're a woman and you bleed, I shouldn't say if you're a woman, I should say if you're a bleeder, you can also put some of your monthly blood in there as well. So what you do is you put all that in, and then you put kind of like a protective spell on that, and then you put it somewhere in the property. And I would suggest too that you, when you seal it with some wax around the outside. And the idea here is you don't really ever want to open this again because remember what you're putting in it. And then you put it somewhere around the property. So if you live in a home, you could put it on the perimeter of the property. That's where I have mine. But when we lived in apartments, you can all, and some of our coven members, they live in apartments. And so what we recommend is you put it in a big like planter, and you can fill that with dirt, and then you just bury that far down in there, and you put it somewhere near the front door. So this can be really good for just having general protection on your property and everybody who lives there and your space. Now, what I think that Valerie's really, well, I think she's talking about all of this, but I think she's also talking about more emotional, mental, and energetic protection, because as what it sounds like, being somebody who's very empathic, you are taking on a lot of people's energy. And this is a tough one for those of us who are empaths and are very sensitive. So I just wanted to mention a small story of my own. So when I was in grad school, I was studying to, my major was counseling psychology, and I had this mentor who was so damaging now that I look back at it. But I would often I could feel the pain of other people. So for example, I remember telling her about being at a restaurant and there was an old man eating, and I knew that he had lost his wife and he was very sad, and I could feel it. I always like want to cry when I even think about it. And so I told her this as well as other stories, and she basically told me that I was not fit to be a counselor. I was too sensitive. I just wasn't going to do it because I couldn't separate myself from other people's problems and feelings. So honestly, at a very young age, I listened to that advice. I switched over and I changed my major into neuropsychology so that I would not really have to do any of the counseling with people. 20 years later, not 20 years later, 15 to 20 years later, I guess 20 years later, I look back on this and I see the bullshit in the advice, terrible advice. Because as an empath, I think that we are very fit to be counselors or mentors or whatever we want to be, but we do need to learn how to protect ourselves from the emotions of other people and not let them get to us as much. So, one thing that we can do is we can cut cords that are attached to us every night. So, this is really simple, and you can just close your eyes before bedtime, and then you just imagine that there are you try to visualize your energetic body, and sometimes you will actually be able to, like, in your mind's eye, see dark cords or things that are connected to you or dark spots in the aura. And what you do is, I like to take like a selenite athame is what I visualize in my mind, and then I visualize myself cutting all of those cords from around me. And if you do this every night, this is a great way to at least eliminate it for that one day. And you may have to do it, like, especially very sensitive people may have to do this every single day. And you just take a couple minutes at night to do it before bed, and it can help tremendously. The other thing too is wearing stones that actually ward off negativity. So dark stones like onyx, obsidian, and uh, if you do that, though, what I do recommend is taking, if you feel that there's a tremendous amount of energy being absorbed by those stones, take them off at night and place them on a piece of selenite and let them just kind of dissipate that energy, so you're not actually carrying that and wearing it with you at all times. So the other thing you can do is you can do some breath work practices. So I'm actually going to, so I don't answer it twice. Someone has kind of a similar question that's related. I'm going to talk about the breath work a little bit later. But I am going to mention here that there is a meditation that you can do that is called, I call it absorbing negative energies into the heart space. So, what happens to us is that when we are feeling the negative energy around us, so I think about the old man that I saw, like, I'm absorbing all of that in, right? But there's also a resistance because none of us want to feel the negative stuff. So we have kind of this, like, where it's being absorbed in, but we're also like pushing it out. So there's this like contrasting energy, right? And so what you can do is what we resist persists. And so what we can do is, instead of that little clutching or pushing back, that little resistance, we try to breathe the emotion into the heart. The heart is incredibly purifying. And so if you just take a few deep breaths and then you really just try to breathe very deeply and draw that emotion into your heart and just ask your heart space to basically dissipate it, to let it go. It's kind of like grounding it down into the earth. So we say, like, ground that emotion, that energy down into the earth and let the earth's energy dissipate it. You could do that same thing with your heart space. So I will mention that that is a full practice that I have a shadow work and energy membership that I'm going to talk about at the end. And that is a full practice that we're actually going to have in the membership this month. So, and then, like I mentioned, there's some breathwork practices that you can also do. Slow, deep breathing can be a way to just kind of dissipate the energy, especially in the moment. And then, of course, I think for anybody who's in like a healing capacity, like you mentioned, shadow work is a very good long-term thing to be working with. You know, especially if you're a healer, you heal all that stuff of your own. You're going to be a more effective healer. So, the thing I remember when I was first kind of learning all these techniques of how to really not be quite as affected by everybody's energy, but still be an empath, is that, we don't want to be cold, but we also don't want to be so open. So when we work with our energetic centers, we start to balance all the energy in our own body. And you've said it, you feel like it's almost like you store it, and it is probably true. You're probably storing it somewhere in the energetic body. So by moving energy through your body, through things like breath work, through meditations, through Kundalini energy exercises, and certain types of yoga, you can get rid of some of the energetic blockages. And then I think you're going to feel a lot better, and you're going to feel like you're not really storing it as much. So again, listen at there. I'll leave you a little timestamp for this, but you can also listen later in this episode. I'm going to talk about the breath work that would also apply to helping you. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to Angela's question. So Angela asked about how to move forward when your mental state has taught you to disassociate. So this is something that often happens in complex PTSD. And whenever I talk to anybody who has PTSD, especially complex PTSD, I always want to mention that you want to make sure you have a trained therapist on hand for when you need it. So doesn't mean you always have to be seeing that person regularly, but it's good to have somebody that you know that you can reach out to if you need that help. Because complex PTSD is called complex for a reason. Now, during the acute phase, though, I think this is where I can really help you with some things. So you need to bring down the central nervous system when you're in that state, when the body is beginning to disassociate. It's because your body, all of our bodies, are not as advanced as our minds. And so this is very true. You know, if you look at the evolution of the human species, we have evolved a tremendous amount mentally in the past couple hundred years, 500 years, but our bodies have not changed at all very much for thousands of years. So what happens is that when we experience trauma and then we begin to like be triggered by it out in the world later on, our body thinks we're reliving it. And in fact, the body can convince the mind that we're reliving it, or the mind can convince the body that we're reliving it. So we need to trick the body and the mind into thinking that all is well. And that's going to help, stop some of the disassociations or at least lessen them. So one thing that you can do is you can breathe very slowly. And so here's where I'm going to give 2 breath work practices, and then I'm going to give another 2 at the end because everybody has like kind of similar questions that they're asking. So a breath work practice that I think that would be really great for both you and Valerie is called the healing square breath. So what you do here is you just start with a couple of normal breaths. You want to definitely close your eyes if you can do this. So if you are like in an acute state, like where you're feeling triggered or you feel like you're disassociating, see if you can go into a space where you can be alone or quiet. If you can find a bathroom, if you're in a public place or something, just get in there and try this breath. So what you do is you breathe in for a count of 4, you hold it for a count of 4, you exhale for a count of 4, and then you hold that for a count of 4. And so those 4 counts of 4, they make the sides of that square. And so if that count seems to be too much, then I would go down to like 3 or even 2 if you want. But the idea here is just have this kind of even breath going. So this one can be really helpful. And I think that another one that is super helpful for a case like this would be the left nostril breathing. So what happens is that our right nostril, so when we breathe through the right nostril, we're activating the yang part of our energetic body. So this is the activating part. But when we are triggered or we're disassociating or things like that, and we need to be coming back into reality, we need to calm the central nervous system down. So breathing through the left nostril activates the yin part of our energetic system. So this is the part that calms us. So if you close off the right nostril and you breathe in and out through the left nostril over a couple minutes a time, this can significantly bring down the central nervous system. So I think it's a really good thing to try. It's also really good for people who are having trouble sleeping. If you are just having a lot of racing thoughts, you can try this and it can help tremendously. So another breath that you can also try is Satali Pranayam. So this one is an easy one that you can do. And there's 2 ways to do it. So this one brings down the central nervous system. It's very good for anger, but I also think it's very good for anxiety. And it's called the cooling breath because it cools the system. So if you're able to roll your tongue, then what you would do is you roll your tongue and then you will breathe in through your mouth with that rolled tongue, and you close your mouth and you exhale through the nose. And you do several cycles of this. It can be very calming for the system. Now, if you can't roll your tongue like I cannot roll my tongue, then you can just pretend like you're sipping in through a straw, and you can do the breath that way. And then you do the same thing. You close the mouth and you exhale through the nose. And you just do several cycles of that, and it should bring down the central nervous system. Now, another thing that you can do to kind of bring yourself back is engage with your senses. So check in with the sounds that are going around you, or even smells. So smelling something that's quite strong, like an essential oil, especially one that's calming like lavender, or one that you really love, would be really good here. You can walk barefoot, get parts of the body down on the ground. I like to put my forehead down on the ground if I want to calm the CNS down. You could do the grounding tree meditation. So really a lot of grounding practices would be really good here. And then of course, like with Valerie's question, shadow work is always a good long-term method to help us heal from, our emotional, our physical trauma. All right, so I'm going to move on to Lisa's question. So Lisa asked us, does shadow work drain you? So yes and no. So it's a complicated question. So it can be draining, and this is why we don't do it all the time. So we're not constantly engaged in shadow work. This is why I like to separate the lunar cycle into two parts and do different things. So during the waxing moon, it's not quite as facilitative for shadow work energy, because shadow work really requires us to go deep down into the unconscious, and the waxing energy is really activating. So what we can do during the waxing half of the cycle is we can use that time to do our energy work. So we could do priming exercises, and if anybody here missed the introduction to shadow work, it's a free class I taught last week. It's pinned at the top of the group. You can find it on my YouTube, Body, Mind, Witchcraft, and it goes into pretty good depth about what priming exercises are. But in short, these are energy exercises that are designed to move large amounts of energy through the body, and then they break up all those blockages I was talking about before that we all inevitably have somewhere in the energetic body. Now, what this means is our energy is flowing more optimally, and we are better prepared for the tough shadow work that we'll be engaging in later in the cycle. So many people, for this reason, do their shadow work closer to the dark moon. During the waning crescent moon is really a very, very good time to do it, because it's the energy in the universe is already facilitating the process. So what that means then is we're really only doing the shadow work. We're preparing for the shadow work, during maybe 3 weeks of the cycle, and then we're really only doing it during one. And what most people find is, yes, it is draining. It's draining in the moment when you do it, but it is the cathartic effect of it. Once you're able to kind of emotionally release something, it really makes it all worth it. But here's the thing, is if you engage in it and you feel like it's too draining, there are lighter aspects of the shadow that you can work with. So for example, you can explore the qualities of, for example, let's say people that you very much admire. Because remember, that shadow is composed of all of our rejected parts. And so it's also going to be composed of, the parts that we wish we were. There's aspects of that down there as well. So really looking at the people that you admire, looking at the qualities in them that you wish that you had, and then really asking yourself, well, how do you embody those qualities, or how could you embody those qualities? So that would be a little bit of lighter work to do, but still be doing your shadow work. You can also do some inner child work, can be really dark and draining, but other inner child work can be really fun and light. So there's exercises like going on an inner child date, finding something that you loved to do as a kid and seeing if there's a way that you could go do something related to it. Maybe do the thing, or do something at least related to it. And that can be a very lighter way to work with the shadow. And then another thing you can do is to really make sure that you have self-care practices set up in place. So anybody who's on a shadow work journey, number one, probably should consider having a therapist or somebody who specializes in this work on hand to mentor them. It's always good to have somebody that you can turn to if the work gets kind of deep and you're struggling with it. but also to have a good self-care practice in place too. So making sure that you have something at the end of each day that is very nice self-care. It doesn't have to be the end of the day. I always say the end of the day because I'm a night person. I can't really do much in the morning, but having something somewhere in the day that is going to, fill you up is something that would be really important when you're engaging in shadow work. And then, of course, remembering to always be really gentle with yourself on the journey because it's a tough one, but for those who take it, it is so transformative and so worth it. All right, Brooke, she asks about advice for healing yourself as a shaman. She said, I've been working on healing for some time and I feel I just don't know what I'm doing. So it's a good question. A lot of people are in the same boat. So sometimes people will compare shamanic journeying to shadow work. There actually are a lot of great similarities here. So, for example, the soul retrieval that is sometimes done in shamanic journeying, which is like guiding your lost soul or pieces of lost soul back, is very similar to what we do in shadow work, where we're trying to bring back some of the rejected parts of the self. Now, my best advice about healing is to work with a combination of energy work and shadow work, like I said, like I mentioned in the earlier in the episode. So, if you start with your whole energetic center system, so starting at the root and kind of exploring your root chakra, I would really go deep into this and I would explore the root and then I would move up into the sacral chakra and then into the solar plexus and the heart and the throat, third eye, and crown. I do all this in turn and I would spend some good time on each one. And if you are new to working with the chakras, I'm in the process of doing a whole series of these videos on the chakras, and I'm already up to the third eye is going to be next week. Next week's Ask Aislin is about the third eye. But you can find all the other episodes right here in the group, or everybody can find them on my YouTube, Body Mind Witchcraft. And in each one, I go through all these processes that you can use to kind of explore that center, that energetic center. So if you start to explore your energetic body, you're going to start to remove some of your blockages there, and that's really there's going to be a lot of self-healing that takes place through that process. You can also work with shadow work prompts. So um, thinking about, for example, what are your triggers? That's the most classic shadow work prompt, like who upsets you or annoys you the most, and then really exploring what's going on underneath the surface, really turning the mirror back around to look at yourself, explore, what is being triggered in you and why it might be triggered in you, what's underneath everything, and you can begin to heal your shadow aspects that way. You mentioned that you said, I don't know what I'm doing. And I think that some of my best advice for people, um, it's going to sound maybe easy for me to say, and it may be harder to imagine how to do it if you're in a place where you don't know if you can. But really listening to your intuition, because honestly, you know how to heal yourself. We all do. Now, we do go out and we get mentors and we get people to help us, and a really good one should be somebody who's really facilitating your own self-healing. They're teaching you how to heal, not just doing it for you necessarily, because what they do is they give you a better gift when they teach you how to help to heal yourself. Because truly, it's not them who's going to heal you, it's you who's going to heal you. So, like I said, you know how to heal. So really listen to your intuition. If your intuition's saying, try this, follow this path, get that book, go here, follow it, see what's there, listen to it, because it really is trying to lead you in the right direction. So we move into that kind of flow state where we're able to see exactly, what's going to be able to help us, who's going to be able to help us along the path. Who are we drawn to? What are we drawn to? Really explore that and then dive into the practice and see what's there to offer you. And then, if you feel that you want more, then I recommend getting a mentor, getting somebody who's experienced at this kind of work to get some more help. Um, and I'll talk a little bit more about the membership at the end, because that is an option. We're open right now to take new members. So I'm going to move on to Kim's question. So Kim asked about triggers. It's a classic shadow work question. And she said, triggers are hard feeling stuck and unsure how to move past an intense emotion. And believe me, a lot of people listening are in the same situation. Triggers are very hard, but they can be our greatest teachers. You probably, if you followed me for a while, you probably heard me say that. You know, if we're triggered by something, it means that we're ready to see it. Now, it may not mean that we're quite ready to heal it, but we're ready to see it. So here's the troubling part is that when we are doing shadow work and let's say we start to get triggered, it means these things are kind of bubbling up to the surface that are ready for our attention. And it can actually seem like it gets worse before it gets better because they're scrambling to get your attention. Hey, hey, listen, I want to be healed. This is an aspect you could heal. So you have to be kind of patient during the process. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer you a couple of ways that you can bring down the intense emotions, but just kind of know it's part of the process. And eventually, though, you will be able to let go of them, and then you're going to find that you won't be triggered in the same way as much by that thing anymore. And one by one, you're going to let go of these things. So when the intense emotions begin to come up, it's very similar to what I was mentioning to Angela before and Valerie is we need a way to bring down the central nervous system. And so you can use that exercise I mentioned before, breathing into the heart space. So you're just going to try to draw those negative emotions into the heart space, just like you would like release or ground them down into the earth. Just trust your heart has the ability to purify that emotion. And then when we resist it, so when we resist the triggers and there's that like, that feeling that we want to push it away, that's actually going to make it more painful than if we just kind of deep breathe it in. So just deep breathe the pain in. It's hard. I practice this a lot myself. And like I said, it's not easy, but it's tremendously effective if you do it, if you try it every time. So just kind of see if you can just breathe the emotion in and just trust. Ask your heart to just dissolve it for you. It can do that. Other advice for you is that, let's see, I had written something else down for you. Like I mentioned earlier, breathing in general, is very helpful. So when we breathe, when we breathe, where our breath goes, our mind follows. So it's really quite impossible to be as triggered by something when we're deep breathing. It's just like it's a disconnect. So it's basically tricking the mind into thinking that everything's okay and that we're not out there being triggered by it. So, doing a regular breathwork practice just in general can be good, but can be very helpful if you just do the breath work right there in that space. So I had mentioned left nostril breathing. So breathing in and out through the left nostril. That is very helpful. And that helps to bring down the central nervous system. And it really brings your body and your mind into the yin energetic space. So this is that calming energy. It's more receptive. It's less activating. And that's what we need when we're being triggered. Another breath that's really great that I didn't mention, but I think that anybody earlier who was talking about kind of needing to kind of not be triggered or bring down the central nervous system could try bee's breath. It's called Brahmari breath. Brahmari is the goddess of bees. And so bee's breath is so great. You just close your ears and then you take an inhale. And then on the exhale, you just make a humming sound like a bee. And you just do that over and over. So when you get to the end of the breath, just take another deep breath in and then start it again. And you can do it quietly too. If there's people around, just try to do it really quietly. But this is a really great breath. It has other effects as well. It can be very good. It's very good on the throat chakra. So if people are having trouble getting the right words out, perhaps, or they have something very hard they need to say to someone, trying that breath before can be really good before public speaking. It's also very good for anxiety. So great, great, great breath to try. And then, of course, doing a regular practice of shadow work will help diminish the triggers over time. But like I said, in the moment, you're going to need something to kind of bring down that central nervous system. And that's where the breathing can be very good. And let's see. Okay, that's my best advice for that. Yeah. But the other thing you can also do when the triggers come in the moment is to really think about, are you able to work with it in that moment? So if you are able to work with that in that moment, then you could try to turn the mirror back around and explore what's there. Or maybe the emotion's too intense, maybe it's not ready to be released. And then you can just try some of those practices. So breathing or that little heart space meditation until it seems like you're ready to be able to face that trigger and let it go. All right, got a couple more questions here. Nancy asked me about, okay, here's her question. She said, would it be helpful to write everything down that was not meant for you to finish? And then she went on to say that she feels like she never really finished anything she started, and it drove her dad crazy. So there's a couple parts to this. So yes, I think that releasing things is very good. It's definitely part of shadow work and energy work, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of your question here. But I do want to mention that we talked about the shadow being composed of aspects of ourselves that were rejected. So this is all of your unfinished projects, all of your unrealized roles. They're all going to fall into this category. They're all going to be inside that shadow self. That means that there's a lot of stuff in there that you can work with and heal. So we can look at it in one side, oh my gosh, it's so daunting, there's so much stuff there. Or we can look at it in a more positive side, wow, I actually kind of know what those things are. So I already know the aspects that I could work on. Maybe we don't know how to work on them yet, but we at least know what they are. That's a very big deal. So what we need to do is try to reintegrate some parts of this in. So what I would say, especially if there's a lot of things, I try to choose one thing. So choose one role, something that you didn't finish, and see if there's a way that you could just bring a little bit of that into your life, whatever that means, and see if you could look for, you know, what does it feel like when you bring that in? What goes through your mind? What emotions come up for you? Now, it also seems, that you have a pattern, like you said, a pattern of these unfinished projects. So it's something that you probably want to explore more deeply. And I know that Nancy has already signed up for the Shadow Work membership. So she's going to be a new member. And I'm just going to say right now, Nancy, we will definitely work with all of this. Okay. But for those who are also listening, there whenever we have these kind of patterns of things that we seem to be seeing in our lives that are negative, we are we probably have some kind of a limiting belief around them, something that's kind of entrenched kind of deep down in there. So for her, she said, I quit everything. So it's a limiting belief because what it's doing is it's everything new that we start when we have a limiting belief like that is going to get flavored or colored by that idea. So why even start something new if I'm going to quit it anyway? Or I'll start it now, but I'm going to quit it. So these are these limiting beliefs that we want to kind of break through because they are self-perpetuating. They're just going to keep themselves rolling if we don't address them. So like I said, we're going to explore that in the membership. And in fact, there's a whole, the workshop on December 4th that's coming up for our new members and our current members is all about limiting beliefs and transforming them. You also said your dad it would drive him crazy. You said he'd called you a failure. And I think it's important to break down and unravel that, beginning to realize that other people's perceptions of us is not the reality of who we are. They have their own stuff going on, and most of them are never going to engage in most of it, and they're probably not going to heal a lot of it. Not everybody's here in this plane to heal the way that some of us are. So the first thing we can do is kind of disengage ourselves from that and just realize that's like anything that you're triggering in somebody else, like your dad, that is his own, is part of his own thing to work on. If you can really disengage from that, you can free yourself at least from, his perceptions of you. Uh, but what I do want to mention here is that if there is something specific you want to release, I think that's great. So writing things down on a piece of paper that you want to let go of and then burning them. I love doing this. In fact, I do it every dark moon. I've done it for years, every single dark moon, just writing down the things you want to let go of. So if there's any of those roles that you want to let go of, or any of the like bad feelings about things that you started and you didn't finish, just let them go and send them out to the universe. You can also rip the paper up. I like doing that as well. But some kind of a physical way that we can just get rid of that and release that energy. It can be really, really cathartic. Okay. And then Storm asked me, she said, how do you know you're doing shadow work? That's a great question. How do you know you're doing it? Well, so I'm going to have a two-part answer here. So one part of this is, how do you see in yourself that you've been doing it? Like, how do you know it's working? So one thing is that you'll begin to see subtle shifts in your personality that will lead you to understand that you're doing it. So you're just going to start to see that you're changing. That's what people feel like. I'm changing. If I look back at who I am now and who I was 3 years ago, oh my gosh, it's like such a different person that I've become. So you just kind of notice I've become a different person, more easygoing, more able to laugh at yourself than you were before, less offended by other people, less triggered. So, like, you'll notice, especially, that things that once triggered you aren't triggering you the same way or at all sometimes. That's a miracle when we finally realize that. You might be able to see things from more perspectives and more sides, seeing things from all sides, and acknowledging your negative traits without shame. So sometimes, like, we know that we have these negative qualities, but we feel really bad about them. But when our shadow work is really working, we are like, okay, I acknowledge I'm that way, but I don't feel as bad about it anymore. And being able to be faced by adversity and really confronting it with courage and pride and resiliency, rather than feeling like you're just kind of falling apart when bad things happen, an overwhelm comes. So we just kind of feel like, okay, it's like, not that the bad thing didn't happen, but we're more capable of facing it and staying together while we do it. And also, really important, like beginning to recognize a bit of yourself in everybody. So when you start to see that, like, oh, I see that person, and yep, they got a little bit of me, or I'm being triggered by that because that's a little bit of me in that person. That's when you really know that your shadow work is working. But how do you know if shadow works work? How do you know you're actually doing a session? I'm not sure if that's the question you were asking, so I'm going to answer both. Thought I'd answer both parts. So, how we know we're doing a session? Well, sometimes we don't. So I think the best thing you can do is just do shadow work exercises. So prompting exercises, you can Google them, find some shadow work journaling prompts, and start working through those. That in itself is shadow work. So if you're doing the questions, if you're doing the prompts, if you're doing any part of that, you're doing shadow work. Now, what will happen though is over time, you may begin to have spontaneous shadow work sessions. And this is what one of them would look like. So you may feel that a large amount of knowledge has come to you very quickly in a very short amount of time. Many people say it feels like aha, like it's an aha moment. And you begin to understand things from a different perspective. Sometimes people will say it feels like a cosmic download, and it can be very, very cathartic. It feels like something very large has been released and resolved. So if you felt any of that, then you've done your shadow work. And if you haven't felt any of that, that's okay too. Just do some of the prompts and just kind of continue doing work, and you are doing the shadow work. So if you have fixed your mind on doing shadow work, then you are doing shadow work. All right, so I am going to finish up here with a little bit about the membership. So for those who haven't heard about it, my membership, Shadow Seekers, this is a Shadow Work Energy Work membership. It is open right now until Friday at midnight for new members. So we are purposely keeping the group small. So when we opened, we had our founding members launch back in September. We kept it very small then, and we're only letting in a few people now as well. We're trying to keep our numbers small here in the beginning because, number one, it's more intimate. as we start to grow. And number two, there's more of me to go around and help people. So there's lots of features in this membership. There is a monthly live Zoom workshop. And in the past, we have done Introduction to Shadow Works. This is the free workshop I gave last week. That is actually the workshop, the first workshop that we teach in the membership. So you got a taste of the membership. If you haven't watched that yet, you can go to YouTube, Body, Mind, Witchcraft, and you'll find it there. You can also find it in the group pinned to the top. And we also did a workshop on Chiron, the wounded healer. This was looking at our astrological charts and discovering the wound in our chart, which gives us an idea of where we can heal during this lifetime. And we also did, right around Samhain, we did a really great workshop on pagans in the afterlife. And there's a whole, it's like a two-part workshop. The second part was soul theory. So it's all these different theories about the soul. It's a really awesome workshop. It also helps us explore our own ideas about death and loss, which contribute to, you know, our shadow in a lot of ways. There is also a monthly live ritual that you can come to. So in the past, we've done one with Kali, releasing negative emotions and negative energy. We have done one with Anana, that was descending into the underworld in order to face the shadow self. And just last week, we did a dark moon ritual with Odin, which is the wisdom of being the hanged man. So it's kind of discovering how the hanged man is an archetype that we can use when we're in our shadow work. And the best part of all about the membership is there's replays of all this stuff. So you can come live, but if you can't make it live, then you can just watch the replays. And if you join now, everybody gets access to our whole membership portal that has all of these workshops and these rituals already loaded into it. You can get started on them right now as you wait for the next live event. So our next live event is on December 4th. This is transforming negative self-talk into a personal power mantra. It is a great workshop that breaks down limiting beliefs and changes them, snaps them around for you. And then we're also going to be working with Ariadne at the Dark Moon Ritual later this month. And this is about unraveling our own untruths. We're going to be working with the throat chakra a little bit in this ritual. And then on top of all that, there's also office hours, which I'm going to have to go very soon. In 2 minutes, I'm supposed to be starting the office hours for the membership for November. But during office hours is just a way where people can come and they can get some extra help on what they're working on. And then I usually have a few exercises that we go through during the office hours too. Those are also recorded for those who can't come live. And then on top of that, we also have monthly alignment practices. So this can be energy exercises, yoga, meditation, breath work, different exercises, like all the stuff I talked about before. All that's in the membership or coming to the membership. And we have this little vault of alignment practices that we're building, and you'll have these little practices that you can go to when you need some extra help or extra support. Some of them are priming the pump. So that means that they're activating and they're meant to get rid of a lot of your energy blockages. And then others are meant to help you prompt shadow work sessions. On top of that, there is a community. So like I said, it's a very small group now. We have a members only Facebook group where you can kind of join in and get to know some of your Shadow Seeker members, and you can be in that group. It's also a place to get support from me in between our live sessions. And we have priced this as low as we can. It is going to go up in the future, but right now we're keeping it low because we're hoping to, help make it possible for people to join. I realize that what we're giving in this membership is at least twice as much. I know that other people are charging at least twice as much for shadow work memberships, but I just wanted to make sure we could facilitate helping people get in it now. And that's about it. So if you are interested, you can go ahead and I'll drop a link below this video, or you can find it there all week long. I've just got different posts that have the link where you can go to the page that will explain all about it, and then you can decide if it's for you. And all this week, there's only a couple more days left, but until Friday, I'm offering like 10 to 15 minute connection calls for free with anybody who's interested and just wants to talk to me before deciding to join, and ask me any questions that way. So if you want one of those, reach out, let me know, and we'll connect, okay? And also be sure to watch the free full-length class, Intro to Shadow Work. If you haven't already done so, I will drop the link below this as well. All right, until next time, I hope that you have a great night, and I will see you all soon. All right, blessed be.